Hello, and welcome to the Trustwave webinar, Decoding Cybersecurity. I'm Doug Olenek, Digital Content Marketing Manager at Trustwave, and your moderator. Joining us today are Philip Petersa, Managing Consultant for the Americas Division of SpiderLabs, and Dervesh Singh, Senior Security Consultant with SpiderLabs. Today, Philip and Dervesh will help us better understand cybersecurity testing, offer some practical insights into conducting cybersecurity tests, and go over the strategic considerations that must be applied before testing begins. Now, before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Our webinar platform allows you to customize your viewer screen. You are able to expand the slides window and view all the different widgets below, such as the Q&A panel and the resource list. Feel free to adjust the size and positioning of the different windows. And after Philip and Dervish finish with their discussion, we will have a question and answer period. If you have any questions, please don't be shy and place them in the area provided on your screen. And lastly, today's presentation will be recorded and we will be sending a follow-up email to all attendees with a link to that recording. And with all of that said, let's dive in and get started. Maybe we should start off by discussing vulnerability scanning, which is a very hard phrase to say, and I'm going to keep misstating it all through this. But anyway, here we go. Philip, maybe you could give us a quick explanation on what type of scan this is.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, so vulnerability scanning is typically seen as the first step in your road to getting more secure. So as a company, I would say that's the place to start. Now, a vulnerability scan is typically an automated process. So it's a scanner where you plug in the targets and you kick it off and it runs. It starts by basically doing port scans, looking for open ports on UDP, TCP, and actually seeing what services are behind those ports. It will then go a bit further and try to identify those services, typically looking at the banner and seeing what versions they are. It will then take the name of the service that's running, say Apache, and then the version number and compare that to the database that it's got internally. And then it's in the database is a list of lists of all exploits that's known publicly. It will then match the software to that exploit. So it will basically say, say Apache version 2.2, it's got this exploit, and it will actually give you a report at the end.
All right. Could you maybe explain a bit how such a scan is conducted, where we look, what type of access we're given to a system?
Yeah, so vulnerability scan typically starts with the company allowing us access or actually facilitating access for us. It could be done from an internal perspective as well as an external perspective. Typically, external will have less ports available, as companies typically keep that quite closed, whereas the internal will have like more systems, more ports open. There's usually not a firewall in between the scanner and the host. So, a lot more ports open versus external.
What do we normally expect to find while we're conducting these scans?
So, yeah, that's a good question. Low-hanging fruit is the thing we see most. It's sort of like the really, really easy vulnerabilities, easy to find, that an automated scanner can find. So it doesn't have any intelligence and it doesn't think for itself. So it basically just matches. So it's the very easy findings. It will then rank them in severity, say from critical, high, medium, low, and it spits that out in a report. But yeah, it could be there could be a couple of false positives typically because it matches that banner version, and it's possible that the banner version was changed by the company trying to obfuscate or trying to hide something or hide the version number. So it could be a lot of false positives.
All right, let's shift over to you, Dervish. About how long does such a scan take to conduct?
It typically depends on how big the target's list is. It could be like a /hit range, which will take really long. And there's a lot of servers and a lot of targets to scan. It also typically depends on the number of services there are. So if because we're scanning about 65,000 ports, And if all 65,000 ports are open, it's going to take a very long time. And also, before we do the vulnerability scanning, we also put a prerequisite in to allow us through the IDS and IPS, which is the detection and prevention systems. This allows us to generate less false positives, and we can focus on a large number of targets and specific ports as well.
Okay. Philip did cover a couple of the things that we normally look for. Did you have anything additional besides low-hanging fruit that we might be scanning for?
Yeah, I think the main thing as well is to check whether the patch management process has been robust enough, because sometimes what we find during a vulnerability scan is server A might be patched to a software, but server B has not been patched. And then when clients go and investigate, they find that the server B has not been added to the patch management list, which we will normally highlight during a vulnerability scan.
And perhaps maybe to tie everything together here at the end of this, why perform a vulnerability scan to start with? What's the main reason behind it?
Yeah, so it covers a broad range of targets, and it's also very cost-effective and comprehensive scan. It goes after the low-hanging fruits, like Philip mentioned, and it also gives clients to remediate the issues, the low-hanging issues, before actually going into a pen test.
Okay. And now, speaking of pen test, let's move over to penetration testing. Philip, can you give a brief explanation, not a brief, as long as you want actually, explanation of what a penetration test is and how it differs from a vulnerability scan?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the vulnerability scan is very automated. And I think the biggest difference between a pen test and a vulnerability scan, a pen test has a lot of manual interaction. So there's a lot of checking and double checking of exploits and actually seeing if they are what they say they are. Vulnerability scanning will be sort of like the first step where pen test starts anyway, to give the tester a good idea of what's out there, and if there's any low-hanging fruit available. They will then move over to like a port scan again, looking for open ports, looking for services, and looking for those versions. What is quite different with the pen test, we won't take that banner as fact. We would then test if an possible exploit is picked up in a pen test, that exploit will actually be tested if it's exploitable, or if that vulnerability is exploitable or not. In some cases, it might say, like for vulnerability scan, it might say that service is vulnerable, but then the patch doesn't work. And there could be many reasons. The company might have some mitigation controls that they've implemented to actually stop that exploit from working, but it's still the vulnerability scanner can still pick it up as vulnerable, but it's not really because of the mitigating factors.
I think I add another thing to Philip's what Philip mentioned earlier as well. So when we do vulnerability scanning, it's highly dependent on what's in the vulnerability database. If just say that the exploit or the issue is not in the vulnerability database, that's where pen testing comes in. We actually try and do banner grabbing and a manual research after that on whether we can actually exploit the issue as well. So that's another key part of the difference between vulnerability scanning and pen testing.
Yeah, another thing that doesn't really get covered in the vulnerability scan is we also look for misconfigurations in the config. Vulnerability scanning will just basically look for services, where in a pen test, there's misconfiguration, there's weak passwords or default passwords that get used and doesn't get changed, and that will all be picked up in a pen test, which is actually you're trying to simulate an attacker.
All right. Now, can a penetration test be done on any client, or is there some type of baseline needed beforehand?
A pen test can be done on any client, but the recommendation would be to run a vuln scan first and then do a pen test. And the only reason why that is to save a bit more time getting those low-hanging fruits out of the way, and then on a pen test spending more time or having more time to spend on more complex problems or more complex vulnerabilities. If the 50% of your pen test is spent on the low-hanging fruit and the vuln scan, you're only going to have 50% less. But if that's been taken care of initially, you'll have more time to actually then dive into the more complex and more serious vulnerabilities sometimes.
Definitely a building process there. Now, how does Trustwave go about conducting a penetration test? What techniques do we use?
We've got our own methodology. We use a combination of in-house developed tools, as well as mix it up with publicly available tools, exploits and techniques. So we do a combination of in-house and public, just to give it a very realistic feel. We also, if there's any auditing requirements, we also stick to those. But yeah, we mix it up. But yeah, we've got our own methodology, and it's working very well for us.
All right. I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat area, and we'll get to it when we're all completed here. But let's move on a little here. Still with penetration testing, Devesh, what can a client expect to learn from a penetration test?
So it's a more in-depth testing. We target the more complex vulnerabilities. Just say there's MS-17, which is the WannaCry exploit, which was exploited using the ransomware attack. We will actually try to exploit the issue, and then once we manage to exploit the issue, gain system privileges, we'll actually dump hashes, and then we'll see from those hashes where else can we go on the network. So we use that system to move laterally on the network. And in other words, we will paint a picture of what an internal attacker would do in order to gain the specified objectives.
And when all is said and done, what type of report do we deliver to the client?
So we have our Fusion portal. This is where all the vulnerabilities are reported. Clients can log on to it. They can see the vulnerabilities there. They can export it to PDF. They can also export it to XLS or CSV. There's also an API extension, which they can export into their framework directly for tracking. And in all our reports, we have an executive summary, we have a narratives, and under the narrative, we put down the success and the failures of what we tried and how we exploited stuff and what failed during the exploitation. We also have the finding section where there's the description, the evidence of it, the proof of concept on how we exploit things, and also the recommendations. And also as part of the reporting, we include the severity ratings as well.
All right, let's take a little side trip here. And I would have to think that while we're conducting these tests that might come across something kind of funny or a little comical or just unusual. I was wondering if you guys had a quick story that you might tell without giving away any names and embarrassing anybody. What might have been found here? Devesh, did you have anything?
We tend to see a lot of old systems, and clients think that this has been switched off for some reason, and they happen to be on a network during testing. It could be that somebody wanted to switch it back on and get some data off, but they've forgotten to switch it off. But the funny ones I've heard is the cleaner came in to turn it on. For some reason, it's switched on. I always thought that was a pen test joke people tell each other, but until I heard it from a client myself, that a cleaner actually turned a server on during a test. So yeah, that's one of the things. And these servers, when they come on, because they're old, they tend to be exploitable because they've not been patched for a long time.
Philip?
Yeah, maybe. I think one of the funny ones that I'm just thinking about now is I had a client that we did a test for, and we found a patch. There was a gap in the patch management where one of the patches didn't get rolled out or wasn't effective. And the client was sure that they did actually roll it out and it was implemented, but then we found they rolled out a 32-bit patch to a 64-bit system. So the vulnerability or the patch management system picked it up as fixed, but it was not effective because it was the wrong infrastructure. So the patch didn't work at all and the exploit worked. So yeah, that was quite, you think you're safe, and then yeah, it wasn't the case.
Yeah, close but no cigar.
Yeah. Another thing I've always come across is when clients update their server, when they upgrade the server, they are upgrading the server with an old configuration as well. So like null sessions on Active Directory, it's enabled on Windows 2003 by default. But when let's say they upgrade it to 2022 or 2012, it actually carries forward the settings onto a newer server as well. So that vulnerability also gets carried forward.
Yeah, it's actually a default configuration that's fixed in the newer version of Windows, but because the config was carried over, it actually made the system more vulnerable by default. It's a strange one.
All right. Okay. Let's move on to our next topic here, which is red teaming, red team exercises. Let's start off with you this time around, Dervesh. Maybe just like Philip did, how about explaining the difference between a penetration test and a red team?
Yeah, sure. So a red teaming exercise is usually very stealthy versus the penetration test exercise. So pen test exercise, you can imagine a person holding a trumpet and blowing it against a blue team, where the blue team knows it's going on, and the pen test itself is very, very noisy. The scope is much larger, and also the scope is provided. Whereas a red team, it's more evasive. It's taking on an emulation attacker. It also takes a longer time because of how we perform the test from start to finish. There's different phases during the test. And there's also, it's a team effort, basically. That's why it's called a red team. So it could be somebody building the infrastructure of it. It could be somebody doing reconnaissance. It could be somebody doing the phishing. It's also gaining the foothold, doing the lateral movements, and then all of us will come in and we try to gain the objectives of a red team.
Yeah, and one of the I think the most important things to remember is in a red team we're trying to avoid detection by the blue team. So which is not the case in a pen test. Like Devesh said, it's like extremely loud, alerts going off all over the place. But we're sort of like in the red team, you're testing the blue team's responsiveness and see how they act and how they react to certain things.
Okay. Now, how does Trustwave go about organizing a red team event? How long does it take? Who do we work with internally with the client? How many people do we bring on board?
So it generally depends on the kind of test. If just say it's a very niche objective, like there's hardware hacking involved in it, so we might pull somebody from the hardware hacking team into the red team to assist us. So it typically takes about 2 or more people in the red team to perform the testing. And while the testing itself, it depends on the size of our organization and the objectives in it. So it typically takes about 6 to 8 weeks to conduct a red team. And in terms of the client side, we are always engaged with one of the point of contact. In the CBAS world, it's known as a white team, where we're constantly speaking to them, we're going through with them what we're doing today, what we're doing next week, how we're going to conduct the testing.
Okay. How much preliminary work do we do to set everything up?
We do a lot, actually. So in a pen test, we just give a VRPT, which is a remote testing system, to the client, and we start testing from it. In a red team, we build everything from scratch. We build infrastructure, our own infrastructure, which has got a command and control server. It has a phishing server. We also do perform reconnaissance from scratch, where we try to create phishing emails. We find our targets. We create our own malwares, which has got evasion in mind. We also build domain reputation based on the client we're targeting. And we tend to use domain fronting and SSL certificate to try and evade detection. There's also specific phishing pages we set up depending on what kind of scenario we're targeting. There's also cases where we have to bypass mail filters through domain reputation and also proxies through domain reputation as well.
Now, is a red team exercise proper for every client?
It really depends on the maturity of the client and also if there is a blue team in place. It's really no point running a red team if you don't have any detection of or monitoring capabilities. It's going to be really easy for us. We always, when client has got no detection or monitoring capabilities in place, we normally go through a pen test. So for a red team, it's always checking how a blue team responds to an attack, whether they're isolating the incident, whether they're investigating the incident properly, and follow up after that with their stakeholders as well.
Do you ever find that, or maybe red team sounds, super cool, that clients just want to jump right into having a red team?
There have been a few cases of that. We do try to put a pen test if they're not ready for a red team, but if they really want a red team, then we have done a red team for them, but it tends to be a bit open for us because there's no detection and monitoring capabilities. Nobody's detecting anything. We find a whole lot of issues, and clients just end up with what looks like a pen test report during a red team.
Yeah,
Probably ends up with.
Yeah, it's just it's a lot more valuable for the client if they can actually test that detection piece. That's quite an important part of a red team is that detection piece, and you can't if you don't have a blue team or don't have detection, you're not going to be able to test that.
I would say it'd be just like beating up on somebody who's unprepared, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much.
All right. So now, what exactly are we trying to accomplish with the red team? So
we're trying to emulate. It could be advanced persistent threat groups, ransomware scenarios. There's also the part where we validate security controls, whether they're actually working or not, whether they're actually detecting stuff. And then the most important bit, like Philip mentioned just now, is whether the blue team is actually monitoring and detecting our attacks and how they are investigating the attack, how they're responding to an attack. Are they isolating the system which is infected? Are they investigating it? Or are they just going to say, okay, this looks quite legitimate, we'll let this through? And so it depends on how the blue team responds mainly.
And another thing that I always tell my clients that's sort of almost forgotten sometimes is exfiltration is something we also test. So it's one thing to actually hack in or to get in, but can you get data out? Can you steal it or can you copy it out? And also, again, can they detect that exfiltration or not? Can they see, like, say, a file that's been marked as sensitive? Is that file copied out, or some other type of sensitive or important data? Is that accessed and actually taken out of the network? One thing to get in, but another thing to actually steal the data.
All right. Now, are there any safety measures that need to be in place so that the client doesn't misinterpret the red team for a real attack?
Yeah, so we're constantly in contact with the client during the testing, and also we give either a daily update or a weekly update as client wants it. And if there's anything which is not right or malicious, they can get in touch with us straight away, and then we can tell them whether it's us or not, or whether a real attack is going on. And that's where they will be able to identify whether it's a real attack going on. And they can tell the blue team, okay, this is a real attack. Do what you need to do to isolate the incident and investigate it and deal with the incident, basically.
And what happens at the conclusion of the exercise? How do we discuss the outcome with the client?
Yeah, so we generally have a close-out meeting, but then again, we always give daily updates or weekly updates as the client wants it, and we highlight the issues and our observations during the red team. There's also a debrief with the stakeholders and the technical team, and at the end of all this, we generate a report. It's a very detailed report with a lot of logs, screenshots. There's how the attacks were done, there's timestamps and the commands run, which is valuable to the blue team when they're investigating through their logs and see what was missed and what was captured as well.
And I think maybe just like we did with the other with penetration testing, do either of you have any interesting stories that came out of a red team?
Well, it's always been nice to have your phishing victims reply to your email and seek support, because at times they really think we are from the IT team and we are trying to emulate an IT system administrator. So there's been a couple of times where I've sent them a payload and they've replied saying, "Oh, the payload doesn't, this executable doesn't work. Our software restriction policy is blocking it. How can I get around it?" And I'll send them another payload which bypasses that software restriction policy, which gets us a shellback. There's also been cases where the login doesn't work for them, and it could be because that they've been using a different login name internally when my phishing pretext hit. You have to use your Microsoft credentials or your Okta credentials to log on the system. And it's just pointing them in the right direction to provide to give us the credentials, basically. And that's had a few occurrences so far.
How about you, Philip?
Just like the old classic, I guess. Like people always like to overshare and put stuff online that they're not. Well, I guess not supposed to, but there's like so much information you can find out about someone. I mean, LinkedIn is like a prime example. People just like to share stuff, and it's actually quite interesting how much information once you string the little pieces together, you can actually come up with a lot of insight into the organization. Stuff like how their email structures look. What type of systems are they running? Windows, Linux. Just by looking at what skills the people have that work there. Are they running, like, say, a Cisco network? Are they running a Juniper network? So it gives you a lot of information as an attacker to make certain choices during the engagement, that you wouldn't normally have. And that's quite an important step in a red team, is the OSINT, the open source intelligence gathering phase, where you gather all those goodies and then string them together.
Do you use this information for social engineering as well?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's one of the key things. If you say, like the email that I mentioned, the email structure, some companies would do like name.surname or first initial plus surname and then the company domain. That's all things that you can find out via social networking. And then, if you email, so, for phishing specifically, if you email someone, you would know like say LinkedIn, you'll know their job title. You can email the most important ones. So yeah, it's definitely something you probably can't go without in a phishing engagement.
And another aspect would be the physical security assessments as well. I tend to go to YouTube, Instagram for getting this information on people posting badges of their employee badges online. And you'll be surprised on how many workplace organizations post employees at work when all the employees in the video are wearing badges. And I could just replicate them and walk into the building using that method as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's like loads of information on that badges. Sometimes even barcodes, if you zoom in, you can see them. It makes me think of the typical, warning: don't post any photos where somebody can see your credit card number. You see those too. I mean, all kinds of numbers. I've seen stuff where people had like the Wi-Fi password in the background written on the wall. All the classics. Those are quite interesting.
And I think another thing to add to the red teaming aspect as well, the funny stories is, well, it's not really funny, but this is why we generally do red teaming. It's basically to validate security controls, whether it's been configured properly or not. There have been few aspects where I think Philip has seen this as well, whereby the EDR software is not picking up our payloads or it's not reporting it properly, because it could be that certain things were being picked up, but because the reporting system was broken, it's not going anywhere. It's not alerting the blue team at all. So this is kind of more of the things we look at during a red team as well. We can highlight these issues during a red team.
All right, let's continue working our way through the color palette here, and we'll move over to purple teams. Philip, could you again break it down a bit? What is a purple team exercise, and how does it differ from a red and blue?
Yeah, so a red team is actual, like the attacking team. The blue team is the defending team. Now, a purple team is not really like a separate team in itself. It's more the collaboration between the red and the blue team. That's why they combining the colors. So it's very a purple team typically would be a scenario is taken and then acted out, almost like simulating. Like the red team would run the scenario and run the attack, and then the blue team will see if they can like either detect it or not. And they would then go back to the red team and say, like, we didn't see anything. The red team will say, like, okay, did you maybe adjust your alerts here and there? So it's a very collaborative exercise versus a raid team. Where a raid team is stealth, like very top on the priority list. Whereas in a purple team, the communication back and forth is very is key. And the more you communicate with the client, I think the more valuable it becomes.
How does Trustwave go about conducting a purple team exercise? Does the client know when and where it's going to happen?
Yeah, so the scenarios are laid out very specifically. The client knows exactly which systems are going to get targeted. Typically, they would provide like a test system that's very, very real world, like say joined to the domain, but they are highlighted. One of the things we typically see is like a ransomware attack that gets tested in the purple team. So ransomware will be deployed to say these two servers. And it will have, like, say, the EDR solution or the antivirus running on those servers, and then the blue team will watch as the attack gets kicked off. So they are very aware. It's in constant communication. Like, listen, we're gonna kick it off now, or we're gonna kick it off in 15 minutes, type thing. That's specific. So yeah, very collaborative. Very they know exactly what's coming. They know exactly what's next, basically.
And again, how much preliminary work is done prior to the event to set everything up?
There's quite a lot of work to be done as well on the purple team. It's very similar to a raid team, as the techniques and tools that's being used is almost the same, if not exactly the same as what you do in a raid team. You still need to try and evade the alerts. So there's a lot of, say, like bypassing the proxy or bypassing the email gateway. It's still something you have to attempt to, because you have to make it as realistic as an attacker would to have the scenario play out. So that pre-work is, I would say, almost the same. And then, there might be some ongoing prep work as you go through the engagement. Say you try like a certain technique, it doesn't work, and the blue team detects it, then maybe there's another option to tweak that technique or to enhance it a little bit. Then you can have the opportunity of telling the blue team, no, listen, I'm going to enhance it a little bit. Let's try that again and see if you still detect it. So it's very similar.
What type of organization should look into a purple team exercise? What level do they need to be at?
I would say the maturity level, the security maturity level of the company needs to be up there, almost the same level as when you do a raid team. Now, a raid team, there's a lot of debate always is, should a purple team happen before or after a raid team? And I think it's valid in both cases. A purple team can be used to sort of like prepare for a raid team. If you know there's some vulnerability or some scenario that you really are scared of and want to test, you can run a purple team and get that sort of out of the way before the raid team starts. Or what you can do is you take the output from the raid team, like say certain pieces in your environment you were really weak or that needed some attention, you can run those as purple team scenarios separately. So I think it's got a place for both. But again, it's key about having a blue team. You can't really test detection without having detection. So again, the security maturity of the company needs to be good.
And what are we trying to discover during one of these exercises?
So, like I said, there's specific things we're trying to simulate in a purple team. We could be simulating a attack group, say from well-known attack groups. They all have a certain steps and certain techniques that they are known for. APT41, deep scan, and all those. They've got, say, they are known to exploit this service hanging on the internet. Then they follow these steps. It's almost like their recipe to success. And we can simulate exactly those steps and see if a company can stop those. One popular one, like I mentioned, is ransomware attacks. Companies are quite cautious about those. So it's always good to know that your solution or your security controls can actually prevent one. So that's what we're trying to do. It's very specific.
Yeah, I think the another thing to add is we're helping the blue team create a signature on the database so they can trigger these alerts and basically start investigation as well on that.
And at the conclusion, how do we go about wrapping everything up with the client?
Yeah, there is, again, like I mentioned, even more collaboration and talking to a client almost daily, or, depending on the scenario, quite often. We do have a closeout meeting, again, talking to the stakeholders and the technical people. Sometimes the blue team needs extra time to go through some of the findings and to match them up with the logs. They then use that opportunity to tweak their alerts and maybe see how they can do it better. Sometimes even after that session, we'll have another purple team. So you'll do all those meetings, and in the end, we also produce a report, again with quite a lot of detail, logs, screenshots, time and actual commands ran, so that the blue team can quite easily compare it to their logs, and date stamps and stuff. Yeah.
All right, and let's kind of wrap this section up the way we were before with anything interesting that has taken place in your experience during Purple Team events.
Yeah, Purple Teams are a lot of fun because you're working together with the blue team so much. So you almost see a bit, I guess it's sometimes funnier than the red team, even, because in the red team you're staying away, whereas with the purple team you're interacting with the blue team all the time. And I think like the one that comes to mind that I found it quite funny was using the tool. There was a PowerShell version of Mimikatz. Now Mimikatz is quite a well-known, footprinted and fingerprinted tool that gets detected quite often. What we did is we used the PowerShell script version of Mimikatz, and we renamed all the references to Mimikatz to Mimi Dogs, and the EDR solution didn't pick it up. And this is like, it happened in a real engagement. One of my colleagues did this, and the client was very surprised that the EDR didn't pick it up. But the EDR was like unaware that something was going on because it was looking for Mimikatz, and didn't worry about the dog that did the same thing, exactly the same process. I found that quite funny.
Yeah, there's also been cases where, and this is the reverse way, where obfuscated commands get caught, but the native's command don't get caught. So it's the same, getting the same results, but the ones which is more evasive gets caught, but the less evasive one doesn't get caught. So it's more of a tweaking in the signature base to alert all these malicious commands as well.
Yeah, maybe one last one. One of my other colleagues, they used the actual EDR solution. Now, the EDR solution was deployed with agents on every host in the organization. And we managed to compromise that management console of the EDR solution. So we used the EDR solution itself to distribute our payloads for us to every host and get access to the host using the EDR solution as the method to deliver the payload. I thought that was quite funny too.
All right. Well, we're at the end of the general part of our discussion, but we do have several questions here, and just want to remind the audience: if you have a question, please put it in. And if you put it in and we don't get to it, we will certainly email you an answer back when we're done with the with this webinar. But let's start off. And first one. Is there how many times per year should a penetration test or a red team be conducted? Is there a rule of thumb? Philip?
There's no real rule of thumb. Penetration tests can sometimes be an audit requirement. So there's some auditing frameworks that require like it once a year or twice a year. So depending on that requirement, you can run a pen test. I would say at least once a year. Same with the red team. Once a year at least, just gives you a good indication of your security posture and actually testing that your controls and processes are in place. More frequent, always better, but it could be like a red team could be quite a costly exercise. So, once a year I would say would be good.
All right, our next question. What is the most effective way you found of gaining access during these events? What always works?
I find emails and physical security assessment always works. It's been our most successful venue so far, and gaining access to cloud infrastructure with MFA bypass or MFA phishing, and also gaining access to offices because of people putting their information online has been really successful so far for us.
Okay. Now, you covered this a little bit before, but someone's asking, could you go into a bit more detail on how you, during a red team, how you stop the company from being, surprised by, not surprised by a test, but having problems arise from the red team taking place? You mentioned that you stay in touch with the point of contact, but are there any other steps that are taken to ensure that the test doesn't get out of control?
Yeah, I mean, constant communication with the point of contact is key. Look, something we don't want to lose we don't want to have the client lose productivity at all. So we don't do any denial of service testing at all. So we won't break anything intentionally. That's not something we do. We do, however, test the responsiveness of the blue team or the SOC. So in the process of the SOC, they have steps that they have to take. If something is detected, they have to feed it to some of the players or some of the stakeholders. Somebody needs to get alerted, and the point of contact needs to insert themselves at a step that makes sense, just maybe before they burn the house down, right? So it's communication is key. And then they just need to make sure that they check if it is real or not. But we haven't. I can't think of an example where we'd actually lost productivity or something was stopped.
No, I think the only thing is that when we find some exploitable service or something which is very vulnerable, we will always double check with the client first whether we are allowed to exploit it during a red team engagement. We will check with the point of contact whether that server is actually very sensitive or whether we're given the green light to actually exploit it. If you're not, then we'll just list it on the report that we could potentially, or attacker could potentially exploit this service. But we will always ask the client for permission first before doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes the client will provide us like a list of servers or services to stay away from. That might be something that broke maybe with the previous engagement that they know of is very, very sensitive to, say, scanning. So we'll have that list beforehand.
All right. Well, with that answer completed, I think we are just about out of time here. I'd like to thank Philip and Devesh for their time, and of course, thank all of you for attending our webinar today. And we do hope to see you at another Trustwave event soon. I hope everyone has a great day. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.